Hi, I'm Pamela Salzman from the Kitchen Matters blog, and today I'd like to show you how to cut winter squash. It's a question I get very often in my classes. In fact, people will sometimes take their phones out and start videoing me cutting winter squash. So I figured, you know what, this is probably a great thing to show you guys on my blog as well. So I have a couple of different squashes here, and I chose 4 that are all kind of different from each other. There are many types of winter squash, and some of them kind of are very similar to each other. So I thought these would be a good place to start. Now, this one is called spaghetti squash, and this is a pretty large one. They come, a little bit bigger even, but I've also seen them a lot smaller. The smaller the squash, the easier it is to cut. I find cutting spaghetti squash to be a little bit tricky, so I'm going to show you my way of doing it. The first thing you want to get is a good sharp knife, a nice solid one. So you can use something like this, or you can use something like this. I'm going to use this one. Now the goal is to cut the spaghetti squash lengthwise in half, because that's how I like to roast it. So we need to cut off this top. Very often winter squash will have this very, very hard stem. You will never cut directly through it, so you need to just slice the top off and get rid of it. So that's where I like to start. So make sure you have a nice grip on the squash with one hand, and then just start slicing. Now this one is slicing pretty easily. If you can't slice it very well, then just take the tip of your knife and sort of get in there and just like dig in. But this one's coming off pretty well. Okay, and then you'll just compost that. Now what I like to do is I like to take the tip of my knife and I like to insert it a couple of inches above the bottom of the squash, or I guess from the top, it doesn't really matter. But I'm gonna, again, grip it well. This rolls around a lot. If you're really struggling because it's rolling, you can just shave a little bit off that squash so it stays put. But I think I've got it under control for the moment. So take the tip, insert it here, and then pull down, okay? Then pull the knife out, and then you're gonna go another inch or so above, pull down. It's like a slot machine, just like that. And then I'm gonna keep going until I get to about the center, and then I flip it around. And then I do the same thing. But at this point, I think I'm pretty safe just to go in the center of the squash and then pull down. Very often, the underside of the squash will already be split, so it makes life easy. There, pull down just like that. And then you have 2 halves. You're gonna scoop out the seeds, which I usually use either an ice cream scooper or a large serving spoon, not like a soup spoon. And you will scoop these seeds out just so. You can actually roast spaghetti squash seeds the same way you would pumpkin seeds, but honestly, I really never have the patience to separate the seeds from all the stringy stuff and dry them out and clean them and all that. So, but you can, just letting you know. And then we'll do the same thing from the other side. And you can then drizzle this with olive oil, sprinkle it liberally with salt and pepper, and then you can roast it. And there are a couple of recipes on my blog for different ways you can prepare spaghetti squash. And I love spaghetti squash because it's just really filling, but it has a lot of water and not a lot of carbohydrates, so you can actually eat quite a bit of it, and has lots of beta carotene and fiber, and it's pretty good for you. So some people like to substitute it for spaghetti, which I think is great, but it's good in a lot of different ways. So this is now a prepared spaghetti squash. So we'll let this sit over here off to the side. Okay, the next one we're gonna tackle is butternut squash. So a lot of people find this one to be very tricky, and understandably so. It's very hard, and there's kind of this weird shape to it, whereas spaghetti squash is very uniform. Butternut squash has kind of this round, like bulbous end, and then it's got this long, thin neck. So the thing about this is that you also have to peel it. So not only do you have to cut it, but you also have to peel it, and that can be a bit of a problem. But I'll show you how I like to do it. So again, we are going to slice off the stem, and if you have a sharp, good quality vegetable peeler, you can just peel away using this. If your vegetable peeler is weak then you're gonna need to do this with a knife. So let's start out, I washed this already, but let's start out by just showing you how to do it with a vegetable peeler. So pretty easy, right? Because this is a good peeler. And I usually take 2 layers off, just like that. And then the same thing goes for the round part. You just start to peel away like that. Okay, if you can't do that because your vegetable peeler is not awesome, then I would like you to separate the round bulbous part from the neck. Make things a lot easier. Good sharp knife. There we go. Now we have a nice stable surface area here because it's flat. And then you can take your knife and then just cut like that. Maybe you waste a little bit more, but at the end of the day, you know, you got to get it done. Okay, so just cut this away like that. And the seeds are all concentrated in that round area, which I'll show you how to get rid of that in a second. There we go. Now, people ask me, oh, can I get my butternut squash already cut, you know, from the supermarket? Well, yeah, you can, but problem is that sometimes you run the risk of bacterial contamination when you get fruits and vegetables pre-cut. The other thing is sometimes they're just not very fresh and they can be a little slimy, in which case, like, I wouldn't recommend it. But if your produce department has a high turnover of cut vegetables, then, you know, go right ahead and do it. I personally like to do it myself, but that's, you know, my choice. I like to cut these into cubes. So you can cut this into maybe like thirds, like that. And then go like that. And you can do this ahead of time if you want to do it the day before. No problem, just store it in the fridge. So we have some nice, beautiful chunks of butternut squash. Now let's tackle that end piece. Okay, so save this for another time, and let's peel away the end. So if you feel like it's stable just like this, that's fine. If you need to do this, then you can flip it over. If your end is like wobbling, just slice off a little, like a little slice right there, and then it'll stay put. So the same principles apply, except that you're just gonna curve this a little bit more. You're gonna kind of hug your knife around the squash, just like that. See how I did that? Okay, so you'll do that all the way around. Cut this in half down the middle, and then you're gonna scoop out your seeds again. So scoop it out just like this. And then once you have this all peeled, you know, same thing. Just cut it up to cubes, or some people like to roast it in slabs, wedges like that, which I think is delicious. One of my favorite squashes, really versatile. So, all right, whew, I'm getting a workout. So we'll add this to our pile of squash over here, but that's how you do a butternut squash. Okay, now we're gonna move on to 2 other squashes that are very easy to cut, maybe a little less popular, but still really delicious. I mean, there's so many wonderful squashes. It's great if you know how to work with them all. This one is one of my favorites. You don't see it in every market. Sometimes I will tell you, I've seen them in like the decoration area of a supermarket, and I'm like, what are these doing here? But I think it's because they didn't know what they were. Maybe they thought it was a gourd or something. Heck no, this is called a Delicata squash. It's delicious, and I call it like the lazy person's squash because you don't have to peel it. Yay, we like that. So you can actually eat the whole skin and everything. It's delicious. So again, take the stem off. Like that. Now you can do this 2 ways. You can either slice it down the middle, scoop out the seeds, and cut these into half moons, or if you want them in rounds, I'll show you the trick for that. You cut it in the center crosswise, and then you just take out a small spoon and you can scoop out the seeds. So, just like that. And then you can cut these into rounds. Isn't that nice? These are so beautiful. I have this wonderful salad on the blog with Delicata squash. They're roasted with roasted slices of apples and rosemary and manchego cheese. It's delicious. I make it every Thanksgiving and when I have friends over in the fall or winter. It's wonderful. Okay, so you're gonna scoop out everything that you can. Same thing on this side, no different. And then you are gonna cut this into these rounds. Okay, so what is that, about 1/2 inch or so? Or if you wanna do it thinner, you can. Just be careful. Okay, so at this point, I think I'm gonna just squeeze it together, like so. And if you're having trouble, you can always go like this, okay? But you have to have a sharp knife because if you don't, you could hurt yourself. So here's our Delicata squash rounds. I'll even take some of this extra stuff out, just like that. These are delicious. Okay, so we've got the Delicata squash done as well. And the last one I'm going to show you is called an acorn squash. And sometimes I've even seen these halved and roasted and then stuffed with something like a pilaf or quinoa or like chopped roasted vegetables. So I think that's a delicious idea. Or you'll see these roasted in wedges. Now there are 2 ways that you can cut the wedges, and I think it's really a personal preference. So let's slice off our stem. Okay, turn the squash carefully. And whenever you have a cut side, I think it's better to just put that cut side down, just gives you more stability. If you think you're gonna struggle with this little tip, just slice that off too. Cut this in half down the middle, and then you're gonna scoop out your seeds. And you can again do this one of 2 ways. I kind of like this shape when you're going crosswise against the line. So you're going to go in different direction from those lines. Okay, give your knife a little help, like that. I think this is a really, really beautiful shape to roast, okay? Now, if you want to do it a different way, I'll show you a different way. So, scoop out the seeds, and then you can cut these with the lines. It sort of has like a natural wedge there. And then you'll have more of a scoop, like more of a little boat to your squash. There, just like that. So, you know, personal preference. Like I said, you can go with that or you can go with that. Either way. But this is, 4 different squash showing you how to break them down.